to take you through the basic steps of trimming. Before you start to trim, you need to make sure that your pots are in a good state to be ready to be trimmed. So they are all, I'm able to touch them and not mark them up. The bases, I flip them all over so the bases can dry. The boards that we have here have a little bit of a coating on them, so if you don't flip them, the bases are always going to stay slightly wet. So you need to take the time to make sure that you flip them, let the bases start drying, so then you're ready to trim. So when I start getting ready to trim a piece, I have my wheel plane, and I'm using the concentric circles that are drawn onto the wheel to help me line this pot back up on center, upside down. So put the pot upside down and first really just eye it onto center. This will be much easier when you start getting more used to throwing centered pots and they're not off in any way. It is more difficult to center a pot that was thrown off center. So I'll use my needle tool and I anchor myself down and I position the needle tool in front of me and I'll turn my wheel on. And I let the needle tool hit against the form. So notice that I'm not jabbing into the form with the needle tool, but I'm just letting it hit. When I stop the wheel, you'll be able to see a line here that is made from the needle tool. I turn the pot so the line is facing me, and this is telling me right now that this form is too close to me. So I push it slightly away, I hold the form down, and erase the line so I don't have multiple lines that I'm confused by. And I go back and use the needle tool again. So you can see it's hitting up against this one area right here. So again, I will turn that to me and push the form a little bit away from me. So now you can see the form is hitting all the way around, so it's centered onto the wheel. At this point, I'm going to use some clay and roll it into a small coil. I'll break up this piece into 3 different parts. Whenever I'm going to hold the piece down with clay, I make sure that I'm holding the pot down. I'm putting the piece of clay around the base. What I don't want to do is push into the piece because I will dent the rim and you really cannot fix that. So I'll push half of it down onto the wheel and the other half I will push up into the form. And I will do this in 3 points, making sure I hold the form down every time. The worst thing to do is to shift the form as I'm putting these pieces down, because I will have to pick up the pieces and start again. I use 3 pieces because if the form does get shifted off, it is easier to pull one piece off and get it back on center. A lot of my students will think that it is much easier to hold the piece down with an entire coil wrapped around the whole piece, where if it ends up coming off, you have to remove all of it and start totally again. Where 3 is much easier to remove one of them, shift it back, and put the one back on. So I'm ready to now trim. You'll have 2 trimming tools in your package. A small one that has a flat side and a round side, and a large trimming tool. I primarily do not use the rounded small side. I use the squared off small tool and the large one. The first thing I do when I start trimming is focus on trimming the sides. So I'm going to focus on trimming off a lot of the weight here and clean it up. I hold my trimming tool with my fingers on either side and I have a good grip on it. Having your trimming tool held all the way down to the base has very little control, and you start wobbling. So the more control, the higher grip you have. I will still anchor myself down with my elbows down to my knees, and I will have light top pressure with my hand as I am trimming. This helps me not shift the whole piece off. So when I am trimming, the one thing I also never do is put the tool up to the form and then start the wheel. Your wheel needs to start first, then you put your hands on the piece and then start trimming. When it comes to trimming, the basic rule of trimming is usually your wheel travels a good speed, it doesn't have to be very fast, and your trimming tool travels slow. So you can see that I'm cleaning up the side, I'm taking off a lot of the extra weight, where in the beginning when you start throwing, a lot of your weight is going to be right in this bottom section. So by taking all of this off, you're going to make a lot thinner, lighter piece. When it comes to functional forms, that's very important. Now, when I feel like I've gotten most of that weight off of here, I'm now going to take this tool and hold it flat to the top. So I'm going to level the top off so it's nice and flat. Notice that I'm only working on one side of the top. So if this is a circle, I'm working only on the right side with the center point of the tool in the center of the base. The wheel's spinning, so it's carving everything off. I don't need to move the tool onto this side, because if I do, I won't be trimming anything. The wheel needs to be going into the trimming tool to be taking stuff off. So I clean the top. Now, I'm going to use this small squared off bottom here to start making my foot. My foot, the area that my piece sits on should be approximately a ½ inch tops in width. You don't want to make a foot that is very skinny or a foot that is very, very fat. So I will estimate in about a ½ inch and use my tool to start carving down. Again, notice I'm still using my other hand as top pressure, and my elbows are still down to my legs. So I've carved a nice area down. Now I need to take the time to take away this interior clay. And I can use this small tool or the larger tool, whichever I'm more comfortable with. So I start in the center and move out to the side. Again, I only need to work on one side of this form. You will never see me shift my tool all the way over here. One of the main goals when it comes to trimming is to not only create a nice foot, but is to also have this area in the center recess down, so I'll be able to apply glaze to the base and have my form be more functional. It also is much nicer to look at, and the form itself is more clean. And I can clean off all of these trimmings. Sometimes I blow onto it to clear all of it off. So basically, this is a nice trimmed foot. A lot of times what I do is I'll go a little bit further and take this trimming tool on the side. I'll carve into this. Notice that my tool is at a 45-degree angle when I'm trimming in. So I'm creating a slight ledge there. Taking my trimming tool and switching it, carving down from that point. And then lightly with my trimming tool, I'm going to round that edge. It's very important, again, in many areas that I've spoken about in any of these videos, about not having sharp edges, especially even now in the greenware state where it doesn't seem very sharp. It will seem much sharper in the bisque state and even sharper than that in the glaze state. So I'll even use my fingertips. The natural oils on my hands will actually really smooth those edges down, create a nice smooth finish. Then stop my wheel, carefully take my pieces of clay off, and that's finished.